I remember the exact second everything snapped. It wasn't the shouting. It wasn't the judge's gavel. It wasn't even the smirk on his face. It was the laugh. A low, confident laugh that echoed through the courtroom as my husband leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "She doesn't even have a lawyer." The room froze. People turned to look at me, and in that moment, standing alone, clutching a folder of crumpled papers, I realized something terrifying. He thought he had already won. What he didn't know, what no one in that courtroom knew, was that this was the last moment he would ever feel powerful. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my story of betrayal, and if you've ever trusted the wrong person, hit that subscribe button because you are not alone. Here is how it happened. I never imagined my life would end up as a courtroom story. I was never the dramatic type. I believed in quiet loyalty, long marriages, and solving problems behind closed doors. But betrayal doesn't knock politely. It kicks the door in. I was reading comments on my YouTube videos the other day, and I realized I wasn't the only one who had trusted someone completely, only to be humiliated when it mattered most. Hundreds of people saying the same thing in different words. I thought they loved me. That's why I'm telling this now, because if it could happen to me, it can happen to anyone. I met Ethan when I was 24. He was charming in a controlled way, not flashy, not loud, the kind of man who made you feel safe simply by standing near him. He worked in finance, always dressed sharp, always knew what to say in front of other people. My mother loved him instantly. My friends thought he was husband material, and I believed them. The first years of our marriage were fine, not perfect, but stable, comfortable, predictable. And I thought that was what love eventually became. Then slowly, almost invisibly, things shifted. It started with jokes, little comments at dinner parties, subtle laughs when I corrected him, a raised eyebrow when I spoke too long. At home, the jokes became sharper. "You're too emotional. You wouldn't understand how money works. Let me handle this. You're not built for this." I told myself he didn't mean it. I told myself I was being sensitive. That's how betrayal trains you, to doubt your own instincts. The real change came after my father passed away. I inherited a modest amount, nothing extravagant, but enough to matter, enough to give me independence. And Ethan noticed. Suddenly, he wanted control over the accounts. Suddenly, my signature wasn't necessary. Suddenly, decisions were made for me, not with me. When I questioned it, he smiled. That same smile he would later wear in court. The night everything broke, we were arguing about something small, a missed payment, a document I hadn't seen. I asked him directly, calmly, "Why didn't you tell me?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me and laughed. "You don't need to know everything," he said. "I'm the one with lawyers." That word stuck with me. Lawyers. Because when I finally discovered what he'd been hiding, accounts moved, assets shifted, paperwork quietly rewritten, I realized something far worse than betrayal. He had been planning. I confronted him 2 days later. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. Instead, he leaned forward and said, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when I knew my marriage was already over. I filed for divorce the following week, and that's when the real nightmare began. Ethan hired one of the most aggressive law firms in the city, 3 lawyers, expensive suits, cold eyes. I couldn't afford that. I tried. I called offices, I left voicemails, I explained my situation. Most never called back. Some quoted numbers that made my stomach drop. I had savings, but not enough to fight a war. And Ethan knew it. He made sure I knew it. The morning of the first hearing, he walked past me in the hallway. Didn't say hello, didn't even look surprised. He leaned in close enough for only me to hear. "You should have stayed quiet," he whispered. Then he smiled and joined his legal team. I sat alone. No lawyer, no protection, no voice. When the judge asked if both parties were represented, Ethan's lawyer spoke confidently. I stood slowly. "I'm representing myself, Your Honor." There was a pause. Then came the laugh. Ethan's laugh, the same one from our living room, the same one from that first confrontation. And that's when he said it. "She doesn't even have a lawyer." The humiliation burned through me. I felt small, exposed, weak. But inside, something else was happening. Because as I stood there, shaking but silent, I remembered a phone call I had made 3 nights earlier. A call I hadn't told Ethan about. A call to my older brother. My brother doesn't talk much. He doesn't post on social media. He doesn't brag. But he spent 12 years as a Navy SEAL, and when I told him what was happening, when I told him how Ethan laughed, there was a long pause on the line. Then he said 4 words that still echo in my head. "Don't worry, I'm coming." I didn't have a lawyer, but I wasn't alone, and Ethan had no idea what was about to walk into that courtroom next. The days between that first hearing and the next one were the longest of my life. Outwardly, nothing changed. I still woke up alone, still made coffee for one, still checked my phone like it might explode with bad news. But internally, everything was shifting. Because when my brother said, "I'm coming," he didn't say it like comfort. He said it like strategy. Ethan, meanwhile, grew bolder. He sent emails through his lawyers, formal, cold, surgical. Every message ended with the same unspoken threat: "You can't win." Then he started sending messages directly. "You should settle. This is getting embarrassing for you. I'm being generous. Don't push it." Each one felt designed not just to intimidate, but to humiliate. And the worst part? He wasn't wrong about one thing. I still didn't have a lawyer. The night before the second hearing, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by paperwork. Financial statements, old emails, screenshots I barely understood. I wasn't stupid, but this wasn't my world. And that's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Put it on speaker," my mother said calmly from the other room. That's when I realized something important. She had arrived. My mother doesn't raise her voice. She never has. But when she walked into my apartment that night, she didn't bring comfort. She brought clarity. She laid my papers out in neat stacks. She asked questions Ethan never thought anyone would ask. She noticed inconsistencies I had overlooked. Then she looked at me and said, "He underestimated you, and that's always a mistake." I hadn't seen her like this in years, focused, sharp, unafraid. And suddenly, for the first time since filing for divorce, I slept. The next morning, the courtroom felt different. Ethan was already there, laughing with his legal team, relaxed, confident. He glanced at me, alone again, and smirked. That same look that said, "You're still nothing." But he didn't see my brother yet, because my brother doesn't arrive early. He arrives on time. The judge began reviewing preliminary motions. Ethan's lawyer spoke first, long, detailed, technical. They referenced statutes, clauses, precedents. Then it was my turn. I stood. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't. "I would like to request a delay based on newly discovered financial discrepancies." Ethan's lawyer laughed quietly. The judge raised an eyebrow. Ethan leaned back again, and then my brother walked in. You don't notice him at first. That's the thing about people like him. No noise, no drama, just presence. He took a seat behind me, straight posture, calm eyes. Ethan glanced back just once, and for a split second, His smile flickered. The judge asked me to explain. I presented what I had. Transfers that didn't align, accounts that appeared then vanished, signatures that looked like mine but weren't. Ethan's lawyer objected aggressively. The judge listened quietly. Then she asked a question that changed everything. "Do you have legal counsel assisting you?" Before I could answer, my brother stood. "Not yet, Your Honor," he said evenly, "but that will be corrected immediately." The room shifted. Ethan straightened in his chair. Court recessed for 10 minutes. That's when Ethan approached me for the first time since filing. Up close, he didn't look as confident. "You really want to do this?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because my mother stepped forward, and when she spoke, everyone listened. "You should be very careful what you say next, because this isn't the kind of attention you want." Ethan scoffed, and that was his mistake. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. The judge ordered a full financial review, not because of my documents, but because Ethan reacted too quickly, too defensively, too rehearsed. The judge's tone hardened. "This court does not take financial concealment lightly," she said. Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. For the first time since I'd known him, Ethan looked nervous. Outside the courtroom, my brother made a phone call. Short, precise. "Yeah, we need someone. Today." He hung up and looked at me. "You won't be alone next time." That night, Ethan sent me a message, not through his lawyer, directly. "You're making a mistake." I stared at the screen, and for the first time, I smiled, because fear had changed sides. 3 days later, I walked into court again. This time, I wasn't alone. A woman in a dark suit walked beside me, sharp eyes, calm confidence. She didn't look at Ethan. She didn't need to. She placed her folder on the table and said, "Good morning. I represent the respondent." The room went silent. Ethan's jaw tightened. The judge nodded. "Counsel," she said, "you may proceed." And as my lawyer began speaking, clear, firm, unrelenting, I watched Ethan's face. The smirk was gone, replaced with something I'd never seen before: uncertainty. But the real shock hadn't happened yet, because while Ethan was focused on me, he hadn't realized who my lawyer worked with and who had just been pulled into the case behind the scenes. The first thing Ethan did when my lawyer began speaking was underestimate her. I could see it in his posture, the slight lean back, the dismissive glance. He thought she was just another name I somehow scraped together. He had no idea who she really was. My lawyer didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She spoke like someone who had already read the ending of this story. She laid out dates, numbers, patterns, not accusations, facts. She pointed to asset movements that coincided perfectly with our marital arguments. She highlighted accounts open less than 30 days before my father's inheritance was finalized. She calmly noted that several documents bore my signature from dates when I was verifiably out of the country. The courtroom grew quiet. Too quiet. Ethan's lead attorney interrupted. "These claims are speculative." My lawyer didn't argue. She smiled slightly and said, "Then discovery will clear everything up." That word landed hard. Discovery. The moment when secrets stop being private. The judge nodded slowly. "I'm inclined to agree," she said. "Full transparency is required." Ethan shifted in his seat. I noticed his knee bouncing, something he used to do only when he was lying. During recess, Ethan didn't approach me this time. He approached my lawyer. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw her reaction. She didn't respond immediately. She simply handed him a business card and walked away. Outside the courtroom, I finally asked the question burning in my chest. "Who are you?" She looked at me and said, "I specialize in financial abuse cases." Then after a pause, "And I don't lose them." Over the next 2 weeks, the truth began surfacing. Subpoenas went out, banks responded, records surfaced that Ethan assumed were invisible. But here's what he didn't understand. People like Ethan plan for battles they expect. They never plan for exposure. One evening, my brother and I sat at the kitchen table. He hadn't said much since arriving. He never does. But that night, he broke the silence. "He's scared," he said. I looked up. "How do you know?" "Because he's speeding up." He was right. Ethan's lawyers suddenly pushed for settlement talks, generous ones, too generous, offers that didn't make sense unless someone was trying to end things fast. My lawyer declined every single one. That's when Ethan made his second big mistake. He underestimated my mother. My mother had been quiet during most of this, observing, listening. Then one afternoon, she asked my lawyer a single question. "Have you checked the shell companies?" The room went still. My lawyer slowly turned. "Which ones?" she asked. My mother listed 3 names. 2 of them appeared nowhere in our shared documents. One of them did. Buried. That discovery cracked everything open. What looked like standard investment vehicles turned out to be something else entirely. Money moving in circles, assets hidden in plain sight, legal only if no one asked questions. Now everyone was asking questions. The next hearing was nothing like the first. Ethan didn't laugh, didn't smirk. He barely spoke. When his lawyer tried to deflect, the judge shut him down. "This court is not interested in theatrics," she said. "We are interested in truth." Ethan swallowed hard. Then my lawyer did something unexpected. She asked the judge for permission to introduce a witness. The courtroom murmured. The judge nodded. "Proceed." The door opened, and a man walked in carrying a thick folder, a forensic accountant. For the next 40 minutes, the room listened as numbers told a story Ethan never expected to be heard out loud. The accountant spoke calmly, methodically, explaining how money disappeared, how it reappeared, how it was intentionally obscured. And then he said the sentence that made Ethan's face drain of color. "These patterns indicate deliberate concealment from a spouse." Ethan's lawyer objected. Too late. The judge was already taking notes. That night, Ethan finally called me. Not texted, called. I let it ring. Then I answered. "What do you want?" I asked. His voice was different, lower, careful. He said, "We can fix this." I laughed. For the first time in years, I laughed. I replied, "You already broke it," and hung up. 2 days later, my lawyer received an anonymous tip. Someone from Ethan's own firm. Documents attached. Internal emails. Instructions. Proof that Ethan knowingly misrepresented assets under oath. That's not just unethical, that's dangerous. The judge called for an emergency hearing. Ethan arrived late, disheveled, sweat visible at his temples. As he sat down, he looked at me, really looked at me. And for the first time, he didn't see weakness, he saw consequence. The judge spoke slowly. "This court takes perjury seriously." Ethan's lawyer leaned over, whispering urgently. My lawyer didn't move. She didn't need to. Because this case had just crossed a line, and once it does, there's no going back. As the judge scheduled the next phase, she added one final sentence. I strongly suggest all parties prepare for significant outcomes. Ethan closed his eyes. But the real shock, the one that would end everything, hadn't even entered the courtroom yet, because the next witness wasn't coming for money, he was coming for truth, and Ethan had no defense against it. The morning of the next hearing felt heavier than all the others combined. Not louder, not chaotic, just heavy, like the air itself knew something irreversible was about to happen. Ethan arrived early this time. No jokes, no laughter, no casual confidence. He sat rigid, hands clasped, staring straight ahead as if avoiding eye contact could somehow stop what was coming. I watched him carefully, because people reveal the most when they're trying to hide. My lawyer leaned toward me and whispered, "Whatever happens today, don't react." I nodded. I didn't trust my face anymore. When the judge entered, the courtroom stood. She didn't waste time. "We will begin with testimony from a newly disclosed witness," she said. Ethan's head snapped up. That was the first crack. The doors opened, and a man stepped inside. Mid-40s, clean-cut, expensive watch. Someone Ethan knew. I recognized him instantly, from holiday dinners, business trips, casual mentions. Ethan's former business partner, the same man who had quietly left the company 2 years ago, the same man Ethan said had nothing to do with us anymore. Ethan's lawyer stood abruptly. "Your Honor, we object." The judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn." The man took the stand, swore the oath, and then he spoke. "I'm here because I was asked to lie," he said. The room froze. Even the court reporter paused. Ethan's face drained of color. The witness explained calmly how companies were created, how accounts were moved, how funds were deliberately hidden during Ethan's marriage. He described meetings, emails, instructions, and then he said the words that shattered everything. He told me his wife would never notice. I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't move. I remembered my lawyer's words. Ethan's attorney tried to discredit him, accusations of revenge, claims of personal gain. The witness didn't flinch. He handed over printed emails, time-stamped, signed, Ethan's name at the bottom. The judge read silently. Her expression changed. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't about divorce anymore. This was about exposure. During a short recess, Ethan finally broke. He stood and rushed toward my lawyer. "This is a setup. You're ruining my life." She looked him straight in the eyes. "No," she said calmly, "you did that yourself." When court resumed, the judge spoke in a tone I'd never heard before, measured, controlled, dangerous. "This testimony presented raises serious concerns beyond the scope of this divorce." Ethan swallowed. "This court will refer certain findings for further review." Further review. Everyone in that room knew what that meant. Ethan's lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently. Ethan shook his head. He was running out of choices. That's when my mother stood. She hadn't spoken yet. The judge noticed her immediately. "Yes?" the judge asked. My mother's voice was calm. "I have something relevant to submit." The judge paused. "Approach." My mother handed over a thin folder. Inside, documents I had never seen. Correspondence, legal opinions, historical records. She explained simply, "My daughter trusted him. I didn't." The courtroom went silent. The judge reviewed the documents. Her eyes moved faster now. "This information," she said slowly, "suggests a pattern." Ethan's shoulders sagged. He knew. Then the judge asked a question that made my heart stop. Why was this not disclosed earlier? My mother answered without hesitation. because we wanted him to speak first. Ethan's lawyer dropped his pen. The judge ordered a longer recess. People whispered. Ethan sat alone. No one spoke to him, not even his own legal team. In the hallway, my brother stood beside me. He hadn't said a word all morning. Then he leaned down and whispered, "It's almost over." I looked at him. "How do you know?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back in the courtroom, the judge delivered a ruling on interim measures. Assets frozen, accounts monitored, full disclosure ordered. Ethan's world shrank in real time. Then the judge added something unexpected. "I will allow additional testimony at the next session," she said, "from parties who have yet to speak." Her eyes landed briefly on my brother, just for a second, but Ethan noticed. That night, Ethan didn't call, didn't text, didn't threaten. Silence replaced arrogance, and silence, I learned, is what happens when someone finally understands the weight of what they've done. But the most devastating moment was still coming, because next time, the truth wouldn't come from documents. It would come from someone Ethan thought would never turn against him. The night before the next hearing, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying one sentence the judge had said. "From parties who have yet to speak." I knew exactly who she meant, and so did Ethan. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed, a single message from my lawyer. He reached out. My stomach tightened. "Who?" I typed back. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally, "Your former marriage counselor." Ethan had insisted on counseling. Publicly, it made him look reasonable. Privately, it gave him something else: control. He chose the counselor, he scheduled the sessions, he spoke first, always. I remembered how he'd sit calmly while I struggled to explain my feelings, then summarize them for me cleaner, smarter, more convincing. The counselor would nod. At the time, I thought that meant Ethan was right. Now I knew better. Apparently, so did she. My lawyer met me that morning with a look I hadn't seen before: satisfaction. She kept notes, she said, detailed ones. I felt a chill run through me. In the courtroom, Ethan avoided looking anywhere but straight ahead. His legal team looked exhausted. The confidence was gone, replaced by something frantic, almost desperate. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Then my lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said, "we call Dr. Elaine Porter." Ethan's head snapped up. Too fast, too obvious. Dr. Porter walked in quietly. Mid-50s, professional, unassuming. She had once told me, "You're stronger than you think." I hadn't believed her. Now I wondered if she'd seen everything long before I had. She took the oath, sat down, folded her hands, and began. "I was retained as a licensed marriage counselor," she said, "to assist both parties in improving communication." Ethan's lawyer nodded along, safe territory. Then she continued. "However, over time, I became concerned." The judge leaned forward. Dr. Porter explained how sessions followed a pattern, how Ethan redirected blame, how he minimized concerns, how he framed financial secrecy as protection. And then she said something that made the room go still. "He frequently asked me what language would be most effective in court." Ethan's lawyer stood abruptly. "Objection." "Overruled," the judge said instantly. Dr. Porter described moments I had forgotten, times Ethan insisted on documenting my emotional reactions, times he suggested I was unstable or confused, times he asked how judges perceive emotional spouses. I felt my hands tremble, but I stayed still. "Did you find this concerning?" my lawyer asked. "Yes," Dr. Porter replied, "because therapy stopped being therapy. It became rehearsal." Ethan's lawyer tried to regain control. "Doctor, are you suggesting my client manipulated the counseling process?" Dr. Porter didn't hesitate. "Yes." The word hung in the air. Manipulated. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a notebook. "These are my session notes," she said, "maintained in accordance with professional standards." She opened it, read aloud. Dates, quotes, statements Ethan thought no one would repeat. Ethan's face turned red, then pale, then gray. One line stood out, a line I'll never forget. Client expressed confidence spouse would be overwhelmed in court without representation. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised a hand. Silence returned. That's when Ethan finally spoke. "Those notes are being taken out of context," he said sharply. The judge looked at him. "Are they?" she asked. He didn't answer. Dr. Porter's final statement was quiet but devastating. "I believe Miss was subjected to emotional and financial coercion." Coercion, a word with weight, a word with consequences. The judge thanked her, dismissed the witness, and then turned directly to Ethan. "This court has heard enough to be deeply concerned." Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently. Ethan shook his head again, still refusing to accept reality. Then something unexpected happened. The judge addressed me. "Mrs.," she said gently, "thank you for your patience." Patience. After months of silence, humiliation, and doubt, that word nearly broke me. She continued, "I want to be very clear." The room leaned in. Power does not belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the truth. Ethan looked down. Court adjourned, but no one moved, because everyone knew this was no longer about if Ethan would lose. It was about how much. In the hallway, Ethan finally looked at me, not with anger, not with arrogance, with fear. "You did this," he said quietly. I met his eyes. "No," I replied, "you did." As he walked away, my brother stepped beside me. He hadn't testified, he hadn't spoken, not yet, but the judge's words echoed in my mind, from parties who have yet to speak. And suddenly I understood. The final blow wasn't coming from professionals, it was coming from family, and Ethan was about to learn the difference between silence and restraint. The courtroom felt different that morning. Not tense, not loud, controlled. Like everyone already knew the ending and was just waiting for it to be spoken out loud. Ethan arrived last. That alone told me everything. Men like him are never late unless something is wrong. He didn't look at me this time, didn't scan the room, didn't smile. He sat down slowly, shoulders tight, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch. His lawyers whispered urgently, flipping through folders like they were searching for something that had already been lost. The judge entered. No pleasantries. "We will proceed," she said. And just like that, the final phase began. My lawyer stood first. "Your Honor," she said, "before we move to closing positions, there is one matter the court indicated it wished to hear." The judge nodded once. "Yes," she replied, her eyes lifting from the bench, "from parties who have yet to speak." The room went silent. Every head turned. And slowly, the judge's gaze settled on my brother. Ethan followed her eyes. Confusion flashed across his face, then annoyance, then something else, recognition. My brother stood. He didn't adjust his jacket, didn't clear his throat, didn't look nervous. He walked forward with the same calm precision I'd seen my entire life. The kind of calm that doesn't come from confidence. It comes from discipline. "State your name for the record," the judge said. He did. "Relation to the respondent." "Her brother." Ethan scoffed quietly. Family testimony. He thought he'd seen this before. He hadn't. The judge leaned forward slightly. "You may proceed." My brother didn't rush. He spoke clearly, evenly. "I'm not here to speak about finances," he said. "I'm here to speak about behavior." Ethan's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. My brother explained how he'd been contacted late at night, how he'd listen quietly while I explained what was happening, how certain details stood out, not emotionally, but strategically. Patterns, control, isolation. I've spent my career identifying threats, not enemies, threats. The word landed heavily. He described behaviors consistent with coercion, gaslighting, incremental control, not as accusations, as observations. Ethan's lawyer objected. Relevance. The judge raised a hand. Overruled. Ethan's head snapped toward her. My brother turned slightly, just enough to face Ethan, and that's when everything changed. "You laughed when you thought she was alone," he said calmly. "You were wrong." The courtroom froze. My brother didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten, didn't posture. He didn't need to, because authority doesn't shout. He explained that after our call, he'd done what he always does. He verified, he documented, he consulted professionals, not lawyers, but analysts, people trained to see what others miss. "Nothing you did was accidental," he said. "It was methodical." Ethan's lawyer whispered urgently. Ethan didn't respond. The judge asked a single question. "Are you suggesting intent?" My brother met her eyes. "Yes, Your Honor." That was it. No dramatics, no further explanation, just truth, delivered cleanly. When he finished, the courtroom remained silent. The judge took notes, slowly, deliberately. Then she looked at Ethan, and for the first time since this case began, she didn't look impartial. She looked disappointed. "Mr. she said, "you've had ample opportunity to explain your actions." Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. His lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, my client would like to make a statement." The judge paused, then nodded. "Very well." Ethan stood. His hands were shaking, not violently, but enough to notice. "I never meant for this to go this far," he said. A classic beginning. "I was just trying to protect what I built." The judge's eyes narrowed. "By concealing assets?" she asked. Silence. "By manipulating counseling sessions?" she continued. More silence. "By mocking your spouse for lacking representation?" she finished. Ethan swallowed. He had no answer. The judge leaned back. "This court will not reward abuse disguised as intelligence," she said coldly. Then she turned to my lawyer. "Prepare your final submissions." Ethan's shoulders slumped. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him, not because he lost money, but because he lost control. As court adjourned for the final time before judgment, Ethan walked past me, slowly. He stopped. For a moment, I thought he might say something cruel, something bitter. Instead, he said, "I didn't think you had this in you." I looked at him calmly. "You never looked." Outside, my brother stood beside me again. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but my voice shook when I answered. "It's almost over." He looked ahead. "No," he said quietly. "Now it's over." Because the next time we walked into that courtroom, there would be no arguments, no witnesses, no hiding, just consequences, and Ethan had no idea how hard they were about to land. The courtroom was full in a way it hadn't been before, not with noise, with anticipation. Every seat occupied, every whisper cautious. This wasn't a hearing anymore. This was a reckoning. Ethan arrived flanked by his legal team, but something was missing. Their energy. No jokes, no confident strides. They moved like men walking toward an outcome they couldn't stop. I sat between my lawyer and my mother. My brother stood behind us, silent, still, watching everything. When the judge entered, no one needed to be told to stand. We rose instinctively. She looked around the room, slowly, taking in every face. Then she spoke. "Today, this court will issue its findings." My heart pounded. She began with the facts, clear, methodical. She outlined Ethan's financial maneuvers, account by account, transfer by transfer. She cited expert testimony, professional evaluations. She referenced the counselor's notes, the forensic accountant's conclusions, the partner's emails, every piece clicking together like a lock finally turning. Ethan stared straight ahead, unblinking. Then the judge paused and looked directly at him. "Mr. she said, "this court finds that you engaged in deliberate concealment of marital assets." The room held its breath. She continued, "You misrepresented material facts, you exploited informational imbalance, and you attempted to gain advantage through intimidation." Each sentence landed harder than the last. Ethan's lawyer closed his eyes. The judge's voice sharpened. "Your behavior demonstrates not intelligence, but entitlement." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ethan finally reacted. "This is unfair," he said suddenly. The judge didn't even look at him. "You have spoken enough," she replied. She turned to me. "Ms." she said, "the court recognizes that you entered these proceedings at a disadvantage." My throat tightened. "But disadvantage is not destiny," she continued. She announced the ruling. "Assessed assets returned, accounts unfrozen in my favor, penalties assessed, legal fees ordered to be paid by Ethan." I felt my mother's hand grip mine. Then came the sentence no one expected. "This court also refers this matter for further investigation." The room went silent. Ethan's head snapped up. His lawyer stood immediately. "Your Honor." The judge raised a hand. "Sit down." He did. "Perjury, financial misconduct, potential fraud," she said calmly. Each word was a nail. "This is no longer solely a civil matter." Ethan's face went white. He whispered something to his lawyer. His lawyer didn't respond. The judge wasn't finished. She looked at my brother, then back at Ethan. "And finally," she said, "this court wishes to address conduct." She paused. "For someone who mocked his spouse for standing alone, know this." The room leaned in. "You were never alone," she said firmly. "You were simply surrounded by people who waited for the right moment to speak." I felt tears rise, but I didn't let them fall. Ethan stood abruptly. "This isn't over," he said. His voice cracked. The judge looked at him for the last time. "Yes," she replied quietly, "it is." The gavel came down. Once. Final. For a moment, no one moved. Then the courtroom erupted. Low voices, shifting bodies, restrained reactions. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the desk in front of him like it might offer an escape. My lawyer leaned toward me. "You're free," she whispered. The words didn't feel real. Not yet. As we stood to leave, Ethan looked at me, not with anger, not with arrogance, with something far worse. Regret. He stopped, turned, and for the first time since this began, I spoke without fear. I said, "You didn't lose because you underestimated me. You lost because you never respected me." I walked away. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. I ignored them. This wasn't for them. This was for me. My brother placed a hand on my shoulder. "You did good," he said simply. I shook my head. "No," I replied, "I survived." But as we walked down the steps, something unexpected happened. 2 uniformed officers approached Ethan, quietly, professionally. They spoke to him briefly, then asked him to step aside. He looked back one last time, at me, at my family, at the life he thought he controlled. And in that moment, he finally understood. Power doesn't come from lawyers, it doesn't come from money, and it definitely doesn't come from mocking someone you believe is weak. It comes from truth, and truth had just taken everything from him. The courthouse steps felt different on the way down. Not lighter, not victorious. Quieter. Like the world had finally stopped shouting at me. People think the end of a battle comes with applause. It doesn't. It comes with silence. And that silence forces you to face what you've lost and what you've learned. Ethan was escorted away, not dramatically, not in handcuffs, not in shame-filled chaos, just quietly, the way consequences often arrive. No speeches, no excuses left, only paperwork, timelines, and a future he no longer controlled. I didn't watch him go, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to look anymore. For the first time in years, my eyes were forward. In the weeks that followed, life didn't magically fix itself. I still woke up too early, still reached for my phone expecting messages that no longer came, still felt echoes of doubt creep in at odd moments. Healing isn't instant, it's deliberate. The court rulings were finalized, assets returned, debts reassigned, truth documented in permanent ink. Ethan's appeals never went anywhere. Because when truth is layered, supported, and exposed, there's nothing left to argue. One afternoon, I sat alone in my apartment, the same one that once felt like a cage. Sunlight poured through the window. I realized something then. This space didn't hold fear anymore. It held possibility. My mother came over that evening. She didn't ask how I was. She already knew. Instead, she said something simple. You stood. And that meant more than any victory speech. My brother left a few days later. No goodbye ceremony, no emotional farewell. Just a hug and a quiet reminder. Strength isn't loud. Then he was gone. Back to a world where silence means survival. I thought about Ethan often, not with bitterness, but with clarity, about how easy it is to confuse control with intelligence, how power can feel permanent when no one challenges it, how mockery is often the language of fear disguised as confidence. He didn't fall because of me. He fell because lies collapse under their own weight. Months passed. The comments on my YouTube channel kept coming. Strangers telling me my story sounded like theirs. People admitting they stayed quiet because they felt unqualified to speak. Men and women who thought being alone meant being weak. I read every single one, and every time I thought the same thing. Alone doesn't mean powerless. If there's one lesson this story carries, it's this. Never confuse silence for ignorance. Some people are quiet because they're patient. Some wait because they're gathering truth. And some, like my family, wait because timing matters. Ethan laughed when he thought I had no lawyer. What he didn't understand was this. I didn't need someone to speak for me forever. I needed people who knew when to speak. The courtroom wasn't where I found my voice. It's where I realized I'd had one all along. Today, my life is smaller, but stronger. Fewer people, clearer boundaries, no need to prove anything. Peace doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with certainty. So if you're watching this and you feel underestimated, if someone has mistaken your quiet for weakness, if you've been mocked for standing alone, remember this story. Remember that power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, and when it finally stands, it doesn't need to shout. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying until the end, and thank you for reminding me that telling the truth doesn't just change outcomes, it changes people, including me.